away, and George has been kind enough to co-host this together with me, so I'll let him take over for the start.
Thanks, Christoph, and welcome everybody. It's really exciting to have this opportunity for a discussion and to have such a great panel with us this morning. So my name's George Edwards, and I'm the Chief Accreditation Officer at NEASC. Christoph and I have been kind of working together on and off on this project since our annual conference and showcase back in December. So it's really exciting to be here today and to have such a diverse group from all over the world. I was on a call this morning with some folks from Dubai, and it's just an indication of how small the world is and how wonderful it is to be able to share our experience and our expertise with each other. So happy to be here, happy to welcome you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Christoph.
Okay, so I think just to maybe tell you where this idea was, what this idea was born out of. So we had this presentation that I gave at the NEASC conference around strategic planning in times of crisis. And throughout this year, academic year, I've been interviewing heads of schools and schools across the world. So, you know, in a Zoom-like environment, whether it's in North America or in Asia. And the one thing I have realized, because the topic of my interviews were always around strategy and how they deal with strategic decision making, and also the teaching of entrepreneurship and that creativity piece, which is so dear to the NEASC ACE protocol. And the one thing that came very clearly out of these discussions is either schools will do it themselves, like what we did at LIS, or schools will bring in outside resources, some of those, you know, household name consultants in the educational space that I'm sure you're all familiar with. But nobody seems to be speaking with each other among schools. So that's kind of where George and I started brainstorming around this and went for it. So why don't we dive right in? And I'd like to introduce our panelists. And I'm very, very happy and grateful that everybody took the time out of their busy schedules either to join as a participant or also to be here as panelists. So let me start with Randall. So Randall is calling us from Lausanne, and he's the co-founder of the Regenerative Alliance and the chairman of the YPO, which is the Young Presidents Organization Planet Action Network. He's a senior lecturer of leadership at Lancaster University Management School through the Department of Entrepreneurship and Strategy, and he's a board member of the Resilience Institute. He's the former group CEO of a disaster relief organization called MedAir and the former chairman of Mercy Ships, Switzerland. Randall is a consultant, a researcher, a teacher, a facilitator on governance, leadership, and strategy for executives, Sunday school kids, and scouts. Our next panelist, who is dialing in from the Basque Country, is Anna. Anna is a co-founder of Tazebaez, which is an innovation group that focuses its activity on creation of learning and training ecosystems for companies, educational institutions, and part of Tazebaez, there's also a communication agency, and they run an international entrepreneurship undergraduate program and short higher education programs. She participates in various companies in the emergent sector. In Tazebaez, Anna works in the culture and team development line of the business, using team and design tools to empower entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial teams in a variety of sectors, including public, private, social, and education. Another piece that is very dear to Anna's heart is her role in the International Cooperative Alliance Youth Network, where she's the VP for Europe. She's also on the executive committee. And she is also on the Identity Advisory Council. So in the cooperative sector, which is a very particular form of governance, which in education, I would translate like basically a parent-teacher association-ish kind of a setup. She basically works on the platform of a new course hosted at the Mondragon University in Bilbao and the New School out of New York. And she was chosen, one of 12 people chosen by the Harvard Research Sprint on platform and data cooperatives on the future of ownership. So thank you, Anna, for joining us. And last, out of the field of education, Jeff Paulson. Jeff Paulson is the head of the Riverstone International School in Boise, Idaho. Prior to that, he was at Zurich International School for 7 years. He was the general director there. He's got a doctorate in educational policy and administration from University of Minnesota, a bachelor's degree in counseling psychology from Boston University, and a bachelor's in arts in mathematics from South Dakota, Augustana College. Jeff has over 30 years of educational leadership, counseling, and teaching experience in 6 different international settings. So in the United States, in England, Malaysia, Peru, Venezuela, and Switzerland. And he's highly involved in international education, serves currently as the board member of the Association of Advancements for International Education. Some of you might have heard about this roundtable through the AAIE newsletter of Friday. And he's also serving on the board of my school, the Latin American School in Switzerland. So why don't we get started right away? The theme of today is co-creation with high-performing teams. And I'd like to start with you, Anna, if that's all right. George, if you'd be so kind to screen share some of the slides and resources that Anna has prepared. But I'd like to maybe take you into the space, Anna. This is a dialogue more than a monologue. Give us a bit of an overview of the theory. You know, how do teams emerge? How do teams evolve? How do you work on the constitution of a teams? How do you select people for specific type of functions that you're going for?
Yeah, hi everyone. That was a super long introduction. I'm so sorry. And I'm so excited to see familiar faces like Daryl and then Jeff in Boise, who is actually the biggest colony of Basque people outside of the Basque country. So that was very exciting. Yeah, so I'm Anna and I come from Spain, from Basque country, and I work in Tasebaes, as Christoph shared. That is called, it's a cooperative that, and Tasebaes means and why not in Basque. And we run Traveling University, that it's actually an undergrad program for entrepreneurship. So I'm one of those examples of team entrepreneurship and leadership being actually trained, right? So a lot of people, and it's an ongoing question whether entrepreneurship can be trained or is it a born-in feature, and I'm the living example of that being trained. And I say trained and not taught because I believe, like we believe in Traveling University, that we can create ecosystems of learning for individuals and teams to learn to be entrepreneurs, but you cannot teach it. You cannot like inside of people's brains. You can just provide them in situations when they need to, you know, step up and embrace those. And with that said, as Christoph shared, I will be bringing to you some frame of what high-performing teams and team entrepreneurs can support their process on, because a lot of the times we feel like, oh, we are alone, we're doing this journey of entrepreneurship and team entrepreneurship, and we are so unique and our situations are so unique. But the reality is that a lot of people are going through the same things, and that's the beauty of it too. When you're in a network, is that you can actually talk to people and they'll tell you, ah, yeah, we did that too, and we thought it was just us. So I shared with Christoph a couple of slides with theories. I don't know if it's possible to share that. There you go. And as I said, you know, we come from Traveling University, that it's an learning experience in a worldwide campus, but we can skip this first two because it's just me talking about my book. But let's not do it. So when we talk about performance teams, I think it's interesting to understand that not all the teams are meant to be high-performing teams. And I think this is very interesting and very important to acknowledge. How many of you play sports? I think this is a great analogy. Yeah, how many of you can raise your hands because yeah, good job, very good, very healthy. But a lot of you, probably none of you, dream to be Olympians, right? You don't want to be high-performing athletes. You just like do it for the fun or do it for being together with friends and stuff. So I think that when we talk about teams in the working area or the school area, we always try to make them high performing and you need to excel, but the reality is that not all the teams are meant to excel or be high performance, and that's fine as long as there is a shared purpose behind what your team is for, right? So for a lot of, as you see here, Katzenbach and Smith share that, you know, there's this it looks like linear, but it is not a straight line up of how the performance of a team and the efficiency of a team is actually not linearly upwards. It goes through valleys, and we need to acknowledge it, that every time the team changes, this changes as well, and you go back in a loop of, oh, let's go back to working group, right? So there is different stages, and as you see, high performance team is the last one. But as I said, not all of them need to arrive to that, and that's also fine. And you know, there is a bunch of steps that you can follow in order to accomplish this high performing, but the acknowledgement that the more you work together at the very start stages, when you start knowing more about your team and you start committing to one another in order to evolve as a team, you're going to go through a valley in the performance, because you know there's going to be personal things and ecosystem things that are going to mess up with your performance that you need to go through in order to, you know, become excellent or high performing. And in order to know how to put that purpose and how to make that journey, we're going to go to the next slide. That is the Drexler and Civet's team performance model, where they look at 7 steps on performing the purpose of a team. And the first one is why we're here. Who are we? Like, why are we in this journey is where it all starts. Why are we here? And then who are we with, right? So who are the people that are in this journey, in this boat together with me, in order to establish that shared purpose? Because if you are aiming to be an Olympian, you want to be in a team of Olympians wannabes and not of Saturday's soccer and then beers team, because you're going to be very frustrated, and they are going to be very insecure of what you're trying to accomplish, right? So you want to know why are you there and who are you with, and then clarify the goal of like the what in the third step. And then when you go down, you go like, how are we going to do it? In the fifth, you do like who does what, when, and where. And then when that's done and you start performing, you get to the 6th point, that is the wow. And then you're like, wow, we're a super good team and we're high performance, and then we need to start again. But the truth is that it may be so that this team doesn't work for anything else anymore. And for some people, the why is just poof, it just went. That was it. That's what they were there for. So it is okay to keep on as a team because you can keep performing well, or is it okay to just dilute a team and, you know, find some other purpose with some of the people? And I don't know how many of you are familiar with bouncing a ball. Like, you don't need to do it a lot of times, but when you bounce a ball, like dang, 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 normally, if you're familiar, especially with baseball, in order to throw the ball very, very far away, the pitcher goes back a lot. So if you see the performance model, you will see that it goes down and then up. And that's because a lot of the time teams focus on of steps 4 to 7, thinking that that is where their strength is going to rely. But the truth is that the farther you go up, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the more effort that you take in the backwards, the bigger the bounce is going to be after the 4, right?
So Anna, I think if I can quickly jump in here, because based on our conversations in the past and also experiences I've acquired from interviewing different schools and myself, that investing into people, it's an investment. It's time invested. It's not time wasted. And I think the analogy of that ball going back is huge. You just have to take the time. And the resource that Jeff had shared with me early on my journey in strategy was Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. And there's a lot of parallels right there. I think I would love to hear from you a little bit something about the team constitution, because ultimately you have a team and a group of people, but what happens when you add a person or you subtract a person from the team? Where do you go? Do you have to start from scratch again, or how does that look like?
The sad thing is, yes, you start from scratch again. But like any muscle, it's trainable. So the more times you go through the process, the quicker you adopt the shapes of doing it. But, you know, it's not a linear thing. So every time that you go up a stage, if something new happens, either in your environment, in your team, in your task, anything will not set you back, but will allow you to reconsider your position, and then you take some steps back and then with more strength go forward. But for me, the importance of this is that you don't feel like you're taking steps back. It's just reconsidering whether your team stands at the same position as it was before that something changed. It can be someone leaving, it can be someone coming in, it can be a new homework that you weren't expecting, or some other thing that happened in your environment. And then you need to reframe whether you are there for the same reason you started, so the why, and then if you're there with the same team that you were starting with as the who, and then if what you were doing still stands for itself, and then you've gone back to go forward again. And it's a cycle. I say a cycle thing, and of course there are techniques to making it easier, and there's the more you perform together and the more projects you take upon that team, the easier and the faster they're going to go through these loops.
The one thing, Anna, which I always found terribly frustrating, my training, by the way, is engineering, and I always struggle with the loss of institutional memory. When somebody walks out of the door, everything that they have in their head kind of tends to walk out. And I know you're going to talk to us a bit. You're going to tell us about the knowledge creating company and how these things work, and how can you bridge that gap. Change the culture so that you can sustain things even when people change. And in education, human-centeredness is the core of what we do.
Yeah, I think if you want to go forward, then I can show you more. I just wanted to give you a lot of ingredients, and then we can talk more about them. But you go forward in the next slide. This is the knowledge creating company. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but Nonaka and Takeuchi are some of the greatest authors for me when it comes to learning organizations. And they show that in a lot of moments, I mean, most of organizations, what you shared is right. People have their knowledge, and the practice becomes a knowledge that is only in people's heads, right? So I can share and talk and show you what I'm doing, but there is no knowledge that it's tangible. And so they divide the knowledge between tacit, that it's inside of someone's head, and explicit, that is something that can be shared and touched, right? So it all starts with you have the knowledge and you socialize it. So I can share it with George, or we can do this in this kind of setup, and then I'm socializing my knowledge. But unless someone is writing down my talk, or someone's recording, which we are not going to externalize my knowledge. So we are not going to actually learn and create a piece of information that now is outside of my brain. So that is making it explicit. So thanks of Christoph recording, now we have it more explicified. As you know, English is my fourth language, so bear with me and my makeup of words. Okay, so you now have it externalized, and it's an explicit knowledge that it's out there and it can be shared. And it doesn't need to be synchronous anymore. It can be asynchronous, because you can just share my video, and that people now know Nonaka, right? And so, but then there is Christoph, George, Jeff, Kelly, so many people in this call, and you know more things. So now you're going to take my knowledge and your knowledge, and you are going to combine them, creating new knowledge, right? You're going to piece together, as Christoph is an engineer would know, the more knowledge, the more sources, the more growth, right? And then imagine that you go back to your organizations, combine your knowledge and my knowledge, and then you start creating practices that combine those. And then you create more knowledge, because practice creates knowledge, and you learn stuff from putting it into practice. But that learning is only in your brain, because you are the only one that tried it, and now you created new knowledge. So now it's again tacit. So unless you come back to this chair and record it again to socialize it and conceptualize it, it doesn't go. So in companies, it's very important to keep this row moving, right? When I learn something and you learn something, and we establish spaces to share that knowledge and try again, and of those trial, create conceptualizations and share again, that's how you make sure that if any of us leaves the organization, that knowledge doesn't leave with them. And if you haven't read Nonaka and Takeuchi, please do, because they're fantastic. It's a thick book. I mean, the content is difficult to go through, but it's worth it. Yeah. So I think that answers the question.
And I think if I can ask a question and lead you to your last slide.
Definitely.
I think one saying that, I don't know if it was you, Jeff, or somebody else who told me this, but the core is to make best practice common practice. And what you're showing right here is exactly that, because it's so incredibly frustrating when you have to restart from scratch. What I would love to hear now about, and because that's the part I always try to pay attention to, is the role of hierarchy versus personality and position and character traits in terms of when you do build a team and do the team constitution.
So what I say always, it's, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm putting so many books in these slides, it's all books, so if you can read them. And then the last one, I mean, it's not the last one, but the last one that is the best, I think. It's the connected company. And we know we need to acknowledge that whenever a team is formed, it's never an isolated body, right? So you are a team inside of a bigger ecosystem. Like in schools, in universities, in companies, most teams are just part of the bigger ecosystem that is the school, but also society and then the world. So it's just a team inside of a team of teams, whatever. And a lot of the times, all of the times, teams are made by people, right? The people that have connections among them. So when you get into an institution, normally they will do an onboarding that says, okay, you are part of this team that is under this person, and this person is under this person. And then you have a very divided hierarchical structure where you know where to go to for what, right? So that's the picture. But probably, and I'm sure all of you agree with me, when you want to get something done, you normally don't go through all those steps. You know that if you want to get something done, for say, printing a document and you need to go to the admin office, you go directly to one person because you know that maybe it's not the hierarchical link to your team, but it's the practical thing to do, right? It's going to get done faster if you do that way, rather than go around, ask your boss, then your boss asks some other boss, and then that's not going to work. The flow is totally messed up. So that is the connected company, right? It's to acknowledge on the one hand what hierarchical structures are put together in the company, but then actually acknowledging which connections and which flow of knowledge happens in the company in real life. And I think that the better that those two can be the same, like to acknowledge that happens, but that we are connected in a way that is not really hierarchical, and the better we can picture those connections for real, the more able we're going to be to actually understand better the flows of knowledge and power within the organizations. So it's actually worth trying to think of what is actually shared and what actually happens when you're part of an organization in order to optimize information flow. And that's
I know at LAS, Anna, that if I need to get anything done, and I'm sure Daryl is going to chuckle at this one, is I go to the registrar because she knows everything about everybody. So, so you know, there are those hyper connected people in organizations that I'm sure we all have a mental image of as we're thinking about this. Why don't you take us to the last book you're telling us about, and then because I know Randall is also going to talk a little bit about those kind of concepts a little bit. So I just want to kind of make sure we go through this, but go ahead, Anna, sorry.
Just one last thing, that the danger when you combine Nonaka and the connected company, the danger comes when those hyper-connected people leave. And then what? You know, like, who do you go to? So how do we make sure that the teams are structured in a way that no one is that key piece without whom the organization wouldn't function? And I think that's the beauty of team creation. It's like no one becomes impossible to miss, right? No one is unchangeable in a way. But this is just my thing, you know, like we train people to not be to be missable, but not miserable. Missable, but equally efficient and horizontal in a way. And the last one, I think it's more of an innovation theory that's called the Medici effect. And I think that when we talk about creation of teams, in a lot of senses, when we naturally approach each other, we tend to interact with individuals that are very similar to ourselves, or that work in the same fields, because it feels more natural and more comfortable to approach people with the same state of mind, with the same opinions. But the reality has shown that in a lot of times in companies are those people that are more different to yourself and your character that work the best with you. So the Medici effect talks about the innovation at the intersection. That is basically, how do you create multidisciplinary teams that work together in order to create disruptive solutions rather than just expand fields of knowledge. But I think this is, this is just a very innovation-oriented book and less of a team development. Yeah.
I thank you very much. And I think I'd love to hear maybe in a sentence or two what is going through your head, Randall or Jeff, on this. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, just type them into the chat. We have time either between panelists or at the end, and we'll make sure we address those. But I don't know, Jeff, do you want to give us maybe in a sentence or two what just went through your head as you were hearing this?
Yeah, I really liked what Anna said about the bouncing ball analogy, because developing teams is really messy, and you can't get stuck thinking you're at one step along the journey. You have to allow yourself flexibility to bounce back and actually reinvent the why, maybe, especially as tasks change and the team is stretched maybe in ways they haven't been stretched before. So, Anna, I really like that analogy, that it's a very messy process.
Yeah, for me, thanks, Anna, I appreciate it. The power of collective wisdom. You didn't actually say wisdom, but at least collective knowledge, the power of that that can be found through co-creation came through strong. And also the tension between institutionalization and entrepreneurial thinking and how to lead through all that. Those are 2 points that come to mind. Thank you.
George, anything that you want to share at this point, or shall we give the word to Randall?
I think we should hand it over to Randall.
Okay, Randall, take it away.
Great, thanks. I've got a couple of slides if you want to walk through them, Christoph.
Yeah, and I think Randall, what I would love you to focus on a little bit is we've talked about the high performing team part. All these things are it's like Lego bricks, so they're all interconnected, so you can't quite separate it. But the co-creation process, I know, is something that you've been working on in so many different avenues. So it would be awesome if you can walk us through some of your thoughts there.
Okay, great. So this first slide is, maybe just pause on that for a second. So the approach I've taken, Christoph asked me to look at it a little bit more through the business lens. Okay, so maybe as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and I put in some of the why. So in other words, it's really more provocations, and a couple of slides might provoke some thoughts, and we can discuss it a little bit. And thinking more also for business leaders. So Christoph, let's go on to the next one. Let's talk about the why. And I thought I would approach this looking at what are some of the issues around us? What are some of the problems in the world? And if we look at those, and we can see lists of the grand challenges of our time, a lot of research is being done on that. The World Economic Forum is speaking about this. We can identify a lot of the systems. And I put one example here for food from the University of Minnesota, in fact. So what are the issues related to food systems and food security and food sustainability? Well, this list on the right here, we see water, of course, is very much involved, which is a system in itself. Okay, climate, of course, culture, health, and each of those are systems. Okay, so what I'm trying to point out here is there's some big grand challenges, and food is one we've probably all eaten or will eat at some point today, so it affects all of us. And it affects businesses. And so if you're in a business, and we'll get to that in a moment, are there ways that actually collaborating and co-creating toward these challenges, toward these solutions to these problems, can unearth tremendous value in the business and those stakeholders of the business? Okay, so let's just jump to the next one. You've probably all seen that. Are aware of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. I won't dwell on this, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but if a business were to open the door in one of these, they may realize there is an amazing amount of wealth, of knowledge, of possible opportunity to be explored by networking and collaborating with others in that space. Okay, imagine if you're a manufacturing business and you were thinking maybe we should engage more with the SDGs. It would help us in numerous ways. Well, by doing so, it would lead us into the place that Anna just took us, in areas of collective wisdom that we would find. Now, if we look at number 17 there, that's just begging for co-creation because it's about partnership. It's not about a silo, but it's much more around how we can move out of our comfort zone as a business leader into new areas, new networks, and new relationships. This next one does ask us a little bit about the stakeholders then, Christoph, number 4. Who are, now these are some general basic ones. So if you're a business or an organization, could be a charity, could be a school. Who are the stakeholders that you might be engaging with? Well, there's 5 here listed, but this bottom question I put is, really, have you really drilled deep enough to thinking about who are the stakeholders around me? I mean, do I really engage with the media in the way that I could? What about other schools in our community? What about not-for-profit organizations or charities in the community that we can engage with in partnership in all kinds of creative ways that would help them, that would help us, that would help the community? Multiple wins could be found and may even be addressing some of those grand challenges that we looked at earlier. But it does take courage. It takes moving out of the comfort zone, probably takes change, and it takes a relational and entrepreneurial mindset to move into that.
I think, Randall, if I can just jump in here, because within the educational context, what I'm hearing right now is and I'm not a big fan of labels, but I think it's the easiest way to convey a concept that we're all familiar with, which is project-based learning. And a fantastic example shared with me in my interviews from the Dalton School in New York was they do a simulation in primary school, I think it's 4th grade, of Ellis Island or Staten Island. And it sort of started where they all dress up and the kids do it. They make up the campus or one of the campuses or the spaces there. And eventually that grew so big that the parents start getting involved. So like when the doctor is here to receive an incoming immigrant, well, actually it's a real doctor because he's a parent, and the police is checking that. Well, it's a real policeman. And so suddenly when you think about, I think the expression you had used with me, Randall, was like that gold at your doorstep. When we think about contextualizing all of these challenges to shape the minds of kids and the teachers that are teaching the kids, you're talking about like the stuff that we need to prepare the kids for down the line, like those soft skills, which are actually the hard skills of the future. They're not soft.
Good points. When I work with executives or executive MBA students, businesses, on developing a vision and purpose for an organization, I'll often say, what would 10 years from now, what would a customer say about your business? Of course, what would a journalist say about your business in 10 years? What would a parent in the community say about, what would a child say about your company 10 years? What would a police officer say? What would, and pick out stakeholders, the unusual suspects. And it brings a really rich vocabulary to this topic of unearthing the stakeholders that could be really interesting for you to engage with. Let's push on. I'll just dance through a couple and then I'll wrap that up. So stakeholders then, by engaging with them, it can be very good for customers, very good for employees, very good for suppliers, and very good for the community and the environment, as well as the owners or the shareholders of the organization. And what do we mean by good? Let's go to the next one. This, I think, is pretty much the last 2 slides. Sadly, that didn't come through. So let's go to the next one. This will be the last slide. Oh, they're coming up. It has to go through. There they are. So the model that we developed, my colleague and I, Professor Kempster, is around seeing all the capitals of a business, not just finance. Okay. Do we fully appreciate where innovation is, innovative thinking, entrepreneurial thinking is in our business? Do we have metrics on that? Do we have the right people on board to be involved in that? Do we care about that? Is that part of our culture? What about operations? How are we with our processes? Have we over-institutionalized in a way that we've got this hierarchy that Anna has described, and it doesn't even enable us to get close to being connected as an organization of humans? What about the community? Have we really engaged with them in that? What about the environment? Do we have metrics on how the harm we might be doing in the community and the good that we could be bringing to the community. So anyways, around these capitals that we've built this model, and then we'll go to the last slide, which is on one picture that looks like a lot. Let's just look at the chimney for a moment. Okay, if the vision of your school or an organization is the desired future in X years, 10 years, let's say, and the purpose is really the distinctive mission, how we're a little bit different than the others working in this space, that answers the why we are doing what we're doing. The objectives then, the big things we have to do to realize that vision, and I won't go further on it from here, but just to say that those capitals can be injected into the key objectives of the organization in a way that beckons co-creation and collaboration, because it'll demand from us to get out of our siloed comfort zone of speaking to the normal colleagues we might speak to, and force us into teams, high-performing teams, with different mindsets that are very diverse and bring in new and fresh insights. Okay, so I'll end that there. The last slide is a couple of references I'll just dance through. One is, if you want to look, so this book that we wrote, Good Dividends, that's listed there. Michael Porter gives the first part of that 10-minute YouTube talk is very much around business being, and entrepreneurship and leadership being key in solving some of these grand challenges of our time. And the last one, just a fun kind of 10-minute video you might want to use for students. It's Our Iceberg is Melting. And it takes the concept of this 8-stage process by Professor Cotter and turns it into a fun animation of penguins and what they have to do when they realize their iceberg is melting. And with that, I'll go back to you, Christoph.
I mean, the penguin video is fantastic because it's very humorous and it's very profound. It's like an onion which has so many layers to it, and it's done in a very digestible way. And I think what you were saying, Randall, about silos and things like that, it is very, very ingrained in the nature of education, because many or most teachers will tend to be in their classroom and will have department meetings with people who teach in a similar subject matter area, either different grades or in parallel. And the challenge for us educators is to find a way to allow teachers to teach, so they have to fly a plane, build a bicycle on the side, and open and think out of the box. And this is always a big challenge when you have curricular results that you'd like to achieve and things like that. So that pushing up the dial from a very progressive way of teaching to a very traditional way of teaching, something which I very much appreciate what NEASC has been doing with their protocols. It's trying to push that dial and helping every school find their own solution. It's not, there's no norming, no prescriptive piece to this, because it's a journey that you're embarking on as opposed to solutions you're going for. But I'd love to, I'm dying to hear what Jeff's reaction is to this one, and Anna's reaction briefly, and then I'll let Jeff bring it all together within the educational context.
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, Randall, thank you for that. What I kept thinking is the organization, the systems thinking that goes into highly effective practice around a core business or a core objective. And the intentionality and purpose then that results around that mindset. There's common understanding, there's direction, there's vision, and every action really is systematized around what it is you're trying to actualize. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was so excited with the way of talking and the reference of management, because Our Iceberg is Melting is a mandatory book in our leadership undergrad program in first year for everyone. Is Leading Change by Cotter made fun, which is super cool, and I love it because it actually starts to shape a leader's vision and the personality profile, and it makes you question so many steps towards leadership. And then when you were talking about stakeholders, and this is a super great topic on how do you add value to the community, that it's actually our everyday discussion in cooperatives, how stakeholders become shareholders, and how to actually involve the community in management and in the decision making. So I'm very excited. Thanks for that.
So I think, let's never forget that we have an aspirational goal as educators to to shape the minds of young adults in becoming to fit into those kind of frames that Randall has talked about. So whenever you hear Randall saying business, well, I was hearing in my mind, like, okay, school and teaching and preparing the mind to think with these, to get used to using these tools, I guess. I'd love to see a little bit contextualizing everything we've heard from both Anna and Randall, and how you see this, Jeff, within the context of education. And I'll throw you a bridge. Because one of the analogies you gave me on my journey in strategy at LES, because Jeff joined our board, and I was like, hey, Jeff, we need to really do some strategy at LES. We need to meet that vision. We need to get those steps again, because we sort of exhausted many of the things we'd set out to do, and it was time to refresh. And you did a big, massive document dump on me, and I had a whole summer to chew through this. And the most powerful analogy that I used also in the presentation at the conference was that of a soccer coach. Why don't you walk us through this, Jeff? Because for me, the picture's worth 1,000 words, and that's one of the best pictures I've heard.
Well, thanks, Christoph. I think you give me too much credit. You ran with some good ideas and made some things happen. So congratulations on that. Yeah, that whether it's a soccer coach or whether you're an orchestral conductor or whether you're an artist and you're trying to create a painting or a beautiful piece of pottery, you need to be able to envision what you're trying to create. And the skills that you want to be developing, either in yourself or others, to be able to create this masterpiece. So as an orchestral conductor, for example, you need to be able to envision and see and feel in a real, genuine, authentic way what that beautiful music is going to sound like, what it needs more of or less of to be at the best it can possibly be. And whether you're developing an organization or helping it write its next chapter in its organizational development story, you want that next chapter to be the best chapter yet in the book, right? And again, this is why I kind of zeroed in on Randall's words around intentionality and systems thinking. Whether you're thinking systems that are worldwide or in our society versus systems that are in an organization, there are opportunities for collaborations and partnerships just to really build up and to develop what you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, as a soccer coach, your team needs to be able to pivot. They need to be able to meet challenges and strategies of different organizations or changes to the environment, a pandemic, a recession, whatever it might be. They need to be able to meet these challenges head on with courage and confidence and a resilience to be able to adapt and re-image. And if you think about the future of education, and Barry DeQuan is on the session here today, he and I did a session in Switzerland once on the future of education, and we talked about the need to re-image, the need to adapt, the need to be able to face adversity with a responsible and a reflective mindset. Otherwise, you're not going to grow, and you're not going to be able to adapt and pivot based on whatever society in the world is throwing at you. So whether you're in Boise, Idaho, or Zurich, Switzerland, or Taipei, Taiwan, an international school or a school is a school. And we're working to develop young people to be future leaders in a world that's becoming increasingly complex and globalized. And wow, they have to have the skills to be able to adapt and to morph and to pivot and to re-image themselves based on what the world is demanding of them. Sustainability, wow, that's huge. Otherwise, you're not going to sustain a soccer team or a highly performing orchestra without it, right? I once met a young man. Well, he wasn't a young man. He was a man who'd really gone through the war, so to speak, of building a school. And he had taken a school that had 0 AP exams being taken. And in 10 years, they had over 10,000 AP exams being taken. And it was absolutely incredible, his story about how he did that. And he asked me to look into the corner of the room. He goes, "Do you see what I see?" And I said, "Well, not really. I see the corner of a room." And he says, "Let me tell you what I see." And he shared his vision to me in such a way that I could see it and I could begin to understand it and explain it to others. And that's what I use that analogy a lot with people. And so to me, I only bring that up because when you're trying to develop a highly effective team in an organization, whether it's business or education, you need as a leader to be able to understand what it is you're trying to create. you need to be able to share and explain that vision to people around what it looks like. And how will we know that we're on our way there? And how do you develop that common understanding? Annie, you made me realize again how messy that process is. And sometimes I get really frustrated with the fact that I want my team to be more highly performing than they are. And they revert back to old habits all the time. But again, that's the process and that's the journey from a psychological standpoint of how you work with people and develop and really maximize their potential and capabilities. Christoph, I'd like to just talk about one idea when it comes to strategic thinking in organizations that I don't think organizations spend enough time on. It's the pre-planning phase and the investment into what needs to happen before you actually enter into a strategic discussion with a community, with stakeholders, with partnerships with other organizations. You really need to ascertain the health of your organization and really where you are. For example, asking quick questions like, why do we exist? What is our core business? What is at the center of what we're trying to accomplish? How do we behave? How do we behave as an organization? And are we okay with our behavior? Or do we want to enhance some of those things? So what do we do? How will we know if we succeed? What is most important right now? And really, what is most important for this organization's developmental needs over the next 3 to 5 years? Really identifying those things and talking about those, leaning into that vulnerability, to me is really critical, because you don't have to have all the answers. You may find the answers along the way by connecting the dots by what other people tell you. Now, a lot of people don't spend enough time on organizational health, in my opinion, because it's difficult to achieve. Boards don't sometimes understand why you're not moving forward with more action and more quantitative type of metrics, right? Organizational health often goes unnoticed, right? People just assume it's healthy. It's difficult to create common agreement. It's hard work. It's difficult to measure. And sometimes, you know what, the elements that make it up don't seem to be anything new. It's a reconnection maybe of the dots of stuff we already know, but it's coming back to building that platform of common understanding strategically around what a cohesive team actually is, what it looks like, what it feels like, and why we're investing time into developing it and nurturing it, and really, I guess, over communicating in some ways its importance to moving forward. If I'm truly going to make myself expendable, where I'm not needed in the organization anymore, it's developing new leaders and a mindset in that school that they can continue running forward, managing that team, managing that orchestra, painting the picture, whatever metaphor you want to use, and then frankly, your work is done. So to me, in some ways, when you're highly effective in your role, you kind of work yourself out of the job, and it's time then to move on and give somebody else the opportunity and start work in a new place. So yeah, I don't know. Strategic thinking to me is it's a process that never stops. It's like continuous improvement or curricular work. If you're going to focus on academic excellence, it always needs to be a part of the conversation, because there's always going to be new players, and you can't take it for granted that it's going to happen without that kind of investment. So Christoph, I'll stop there.
No, I love how you're bringing it all together, and I think what resonated with me is how I almost heard that bouncing ball model that Anna showed at the beginning, where you have to like go back to jump higher, or to throw that ball farther, meaning invest into the team. This works on a team level, but actually this works on an entire organizational level too. The school is an entire team. And so all these questions you ask yourself on a smaller scale of, like, why are we doing this, and who is doing this, and what we do, all these different steps, which you have to constantly invest in. Well, when you look at that as a high performance team, well, high performance school is not too far stretched from there. It's the same questions. It's a different process, obviously, because of scale. But the process of alignment and communication around direction is your best chance on creating a high-performing organization / school.
Yeah, well said, because there are multiple teams, right, that you're trying to develop, and they each have multiple purposes, or maybe defined purposes around what their role clarity is, or what their mission is to accomplish. And whether these are ad hoc teams or teams that are in place structurally, ongoingly, wow, how you communicate them and set goals and systematize their work really is important. Otherwise, there's redundancy or there's gaps and the work isn't getting done. So, I had a mentor once who said to me, Jeff, the challenge in leading isn't leading, it's managing what you delegate to others, right? And managing these systems to ensure that the work gets done and understanding where the gaps are or where you need to take a step back to actually move forward with more vigor. So, again, it's that almost checking your ego at the door, leaning into the vulnerability. And if you haven't read any Brené Brown's work, I really encourage you to do that. She taught me some really good lessons about you don't have to be an expert on everything. Matter of fact, don't be an expert on anything, actually, and surround yourself with really good people, but just understand where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I mean, to me, lessons learned in a lot of ways as a practitioner of all this stuff, that change management is really important. Understanding where people's threshold is with change management. And in a COVID world, I've learned in a school, we almost need a new theory on change management during a pandemic, right? Because there's a different mindset around predictability and sustainability and stability around, hey, let's just keep things going the way they are. When you may have the mindset as the head of the organization, hey, let's use the pandemic as an opportunity to thrive, actually, let's keep moving forward. And so you're having to really invest in shifting of mindsets around a stressful environment.
No, and I think I'll quickly put in a pitch for the next theme that George and I have been discussing for the next roundtable, which is around community inclusiveness and the role of communication, because it's so important to get everybody on board with that general sense of direction you're aiming for. But I see, like, just keeping an eye for the time and being mindful of everybody's schedules. I just wanted to open up and see if anybody had any comments or any questions from the participants' perspective. Go ahead if you want to chat, if you want to put it into the chat, if you want to just unmute yourself, anything is welcome. We're a small enough group to allow everybody to chime in at this point.
I thought it was very cool what Jeff said about keeping people engaged in the purpose. And I think one of the things that is super tough sometimes is like, how do you communicate the purpose without people thinking that you are like trying to just put it through down? And in my company, one of the things that we're always thinking is like, how do you engage people that are members or are not members into the creation of that very purpose, right? So how do you keep people engaged in the design and not just like dumping the purpose into their heads and just making sure that they just swallow it? But I think that when we talk entrepreneurship is kind of natural, and when we talk intrapreneurship, it's less easy to visualize the design systems of how each team can design their vision and then include it in the vision of the organization. So that's why entrepreneurship for me is very tough, and especially in ecosystems like schools, where the curriculum that you're doing for your users is sometimes very tough to mess up with. I think that the creation of a team that has a specific organizational purpose, but how do we make sure that twist the borders a little bit to make sure that that team feels engaged with the purpose and not just like dumped on something in their backpacks. One more thing, we call it a marron, like you throw a brown to them and they need to catch it in their backpack again. It's just like, no, how do you make sure that they are engaged in the whole design process? I think that it's very interesting, because that's where leaders are going to emerge.
Keely, sorry, I just saw a note in that I could throw a comment out on that. I picking up on what Jeff shared, I think a lot of, my observation is that a lot of strategic planning is done with not much strategic thinking beforehand. And so then how does that happen? Well, if we don't have the courage to invite other people into the room, to get out of our comfort zone, because we have a culture that is very maybe command and control and makes me feel like I'm in charge. If we don't have a posture of humility, if we don't have a posture that can even move into spaces of vulnerability that can bring trust, well, then we won't probably have the kind of strategic thinking that would enable us to be creative, to go to that new place, to be a bit more bold. Okay, so I think in the strategic planning process, even before it, start to face that issue that you put in the chat, Keely, with courage, and to which it's a leadership issue that comes in here, maybe even at the board level. Do I have the courage to enable us to go to places that might be out of my comfort zone and out of my area of competence or confidence? And do I have the chemistry of the team that can enable us to go in that way? So anyway, a couple of thoughts. Back to you, Christoph.
Christoph, if I could jump in. Kelly, is that how you say your name? Yeah. Kelly, you know, I've had some experiences like that where how do you shift the culture from a hierarchical top down to more of a collaborative type of open, transparent type of process? I've actually, the strategy I used, honestly, was I started talking about collaboration and if that was important. And where that kind of ranked on people's scale of 1 to 10 in sense of a value, right? Or transparency, or open communication, or empowerment, or, hey, is it important for everybody to have an active voice and to feel like they're contributing meaningfully to this organization and they're valued for the strengths that they bring to the conversation, right? So kind of coming in through the back door by asking those kinds of questions and just talking about how people felt and how they responded. And then I would just tailor my next steps based on my feeling about kind of where they were going along on that conversation, right? So again, to me, it worked in some ways, but through that you learn a lot about what people are valuing.
It's a very Socratic approach, inquiry-based learning, which is the word you've used with me recently too. So Anna, yes.
I finally found out where the hand up is, and I don't do it physically anymore. No, I think that one of the things that I shared in the chat is like, why is the culture changing? Is it one more thing that someone decided and you're just accepting it, or is it a common purpose that the organization is sharing? Maybe one of the strongest points, is it because we want it, or is it being just, again, made us do? And then who and how is it going to be led, and at what point is the rest of the organization going to be taking steps, and how much are they going to be able to lead, and how much is their purpose going to be heard? Because one thing for me in managing cultures in organizations at the public level, but also the private level and the educational level, is, oh, we want to transform. And then if it goes out of what the leading person thought transformation was going to be, then, and then you're creating expectations to your organization. It's like, oh, be bold, share your ideas. And suddenly it's like, oh no, that's too crazy. Your idea is useless. We're not going to do it. And this is my idea, super transformation. And then it's like, and then the next time that you ask the team to be engaged in transforming something, they're just not going to do it, because you just kept creating expectations and then cutting them off. So, you need to balance very well expectations and delivery. And then is the transformation happening ground up, or is it something that it's going to be led again by the same people and then in not being collaborative at all? Very negative feeling, but I think it's super good at transforming socially, but it needs to be led in a culture where that engagement in design is true, and it's not just greenwashing or power washing, or call it whatever.
So I think what I just heard right now is something that I also pulled out of the 5 dysfunctions of a team from Patrick Lencioni, where the last highest step is where you make the goals, not individual goals, but you make them team goals. And in effect, what Anna just said and what Jeff said just before is you work yourself out of responsibility to fulfill the goals you on your own, because it's okay to hold the other person accountable as long as you're on the same team. And that is one of those things which came across strongly when I was interviewing different schools. You're like, don't make it like Jeff's head of school plan, because Jeff is going to leave, and then the new head of school comes in and he'll be like, hey, you know what, I want to make this my plan. No, make it a school plan. Take the ego out of the picture. Make it a team, a school-wide goal. And communication is there's not enough communication you can do around this. And this is, by the way, going to be the theme of our next roundtable discussion. I'm already thinking about inviting a person that I've been interviewing from the Dalton School, which is a very, very different setup, because they're a day school, they're very high stakes, very intense, and communication is so important in that context compared to the one I was used to at LAS, which is a boarding school with parents sitting thousands of miles away. Suddenly you've got people at your doorstep all the time, and the same people are sitting at your door, at your board, and the same people are sitting, you know, like at the state and island simulation helping out. There are treasures at the doorstep to be had, but you have to make sure you manage everybody's expectations on that one. So with that being said, if there are no more questions, I just wanted to really thank the panelists for joining me. This was absolutely amazing. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. You know, the more we as schools are able to exchange around these topics, I think the better we'll be prepared. And don't forget, COVID gave us many gifts when it came to change, because it forced our hand to a certain degree. And you know, you can look at this as a one of the big things I like to say is, you can perceive yourself as a victim of COVID, or you can perceive yourself as being victimized by COVID. When you perceive yourself as having been victimized by the circumstances, you have a chance of seeing what the gift is inside. If you look at yourself as being a victim of circumstances, that mindset is much more difficult to get out of. So look for those gifts. They're out there. Look at those gifts. As hard as it might seem, and as unobvious it might seem, the gifts are there. And so with that being said, I just want to say again, thank you to Anna, Randall, and Jeff, and George. And I'll be sending you guys all an email out with the references. And you know what? We'll be in touch, and I hope to see you guys around for the next roundtable discussion. Spread the word. The more the merrier on this one, and we'll see where this leads. Okay.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Christoph. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.